First of all, thank you, Massive and Apify, for hosting this event. It's very great. We're just before the launch, so I will be very brief. Don't worry. So, okay, doesn't work. Okay, I'll do it. Okay. So, just 2 words about myself. I'm Pierlugi Vinciguerra, co-founder of Databoutique.com. I'm in the web scraping industry from 2009, and I started my own newsletter about web scraping some years ago. So you can find my links over there. Just a quick poll for know each other. Please raise your hand if you're building scrapers, let's say on a monthly or weekly basis. Good, a lot of developers. Okay, please your hands up if you're liking handling with manual JSON parsing or HTML parsing or something like that. Really? You like fixing selectors? I'm not sure. So HTML parsing sucks. HTML changes time over time on every website. Every website has different selectors. It's kind of boring work. So it's a hard part of the scraping industry. But luckily for us, we have LLM here to help. LLMs promise to solve HTML parsing. They're extracting the data from every code of every website here. So the dark side of this is that maybe scraping professionals are no longer needed and our career is dead. But there is only one thing we say to that: not today. Let's slowing down the LLM adoption then. Why we are not using LLMs on a large base today? Probably, okay, no problem. Okay, so probably it's because the accuracy and their reliability is a matter of cost and the execution times. Let's dive a bit on these issues. Speaking about accuracy and reliability, we all know that LLMs can hallucinate sometimes, especially if we stuff the prompt with a lot of useless and crazy HTML code. On the other hand, the reliability is also a question because if we take the same prompt on the same URL and we continue running the same prompt on the same URL, probably at a certain point, we will not get the same data as expected. Because at the end of the day, it's a matter of statistics. So we get the most plausible answer to our question with a pinch of randomness, but it's not like programming in a certain way. So am I saying that LLMs are unuseful? No, sorry. There are other issues, of course. The second issue is the cost. If we ingest a full HTML page, HTML code on a prompt, we can incur in a very large bill with our LLM provider because we pay for tokens in input or in output, obviously. In this example you see here, we have a standard e-commerce page on Italy. And this page, the full HTML of this page is almost 300,000 tokens, which cost, in the most advanced models now today, almost $1 per, just for reading this page, which is a crazy amount. And imagine doing this for 1 million pages. Of course, there are cheapest models, but just to give an order of dimension of the cost issues in using LLM in parsing HTML. And the third part is that the execution times. Of course, if you chat with ChatGPT, you see that the answer comes after a few seconds. And it's okay if you are chatting with them, with an LLM in general, but if you are querying millions of pages, sending millions of requests on any API, it's not feasible to have seconds of delay for getting the response. And even if we split and parallelize the request, we have an hard limit that is, by default, set by LLM API we are using, because there is a rate limit, of course, for any API key you are using. So are LLMs useless for scraping? Well, I will not say so. I ran an experiment about this topic on my newsletter. I was using ScrapeGraph AI, which is an open source tool, very cool, where you just can plug any LLM model, both in local and commercial ones like Grok, DeepSeek, GPTs, and all these kind of models. And they recently launched their API, which basically gives you the possibility to send a URL, a desired output data format, and then you get the data from the website. For this project, I've chosen 100 URLs for 13 different websites. This is the nightmare of traditional scraping, because we are scaling horizontally. We have a lot of websites with a few URLs per website. Traditionally, it will take us weeks to develop 33 different scrapers. The reality is that using this API and LLMs in general, we had a 72% success rate with results, which means that the results were filled with, all the output fields were populated correctly. The 13% of error we get was about fetching the content. So they are not related to LLM parsing of the HTML, but just probably on networking issues or anti-bot on the websites. Last, we get 15% of HTML parsing error, where we had some error in extracting the prices mainly of some products, but they were focused on just few websites, 5 websites in this case. The whole scraping costed $4, so $4, and it took 20 minutes to finish. To be honest, it could take even less, because I only asked 1 URL per time, but I could parallelize the request to make it finish earlier. So if you think about it, in comparison with the traditional web scraping, 20 minutes or 4 minutes for only 100 URLs can be considered slow, but we should consider also the time we saved from developing these 33 scrapers. And the same goes with the cost. Developing 33 scrapers cost a lot, of course. And here we spent only $4. We got 15% of error, but focused on a few websites, which means that we can use a custom approach for only a few websites, or maybe even use a specialized prompt for those websites. So as I was mentioning before, this is the best use case for LLMs, because we have many websites, a few number of requests, and compared with traditional web scraping is way cheaper and faster with the development type. Also, using this kind of APIs enable also developers that are not web scraping professionals to use web data. But what happens instead if we want to scrape vertically? So fewer websites with more URLs per website, let's say 1 million URLs per website. Well, in this case, we have seen before that LLMs are not a good choice, at least for parsing every time the HTML. But we can use them to parse a few pages per each website and create the code for our scrapers in order to speed up the scraping development process. I made a small experiment with cursor and cursor rules in my latest issues of a newsletter. Basically, I started cursor. I enabled an MCP I created for simply fetching the HTML and put it in get it in the workspace. And then I created a set of rules for the LLMs that basically were a step-by-step guide to create these these scrapers And depending from the type of scraper I was asking, the LLM created a working version of a scrapey spider with the output fields I desired. So it's a work in progress. Of course, we are far from perfection, but it's like having an AI intern that writes the code for you, and then you can supervision it. So just as a reminder of this conference, or the title of this speech, no, LLMs are not replacing my scrapers in my large web scraping project, but they are helping me writing them. Thanks a lot. Here we are. Do you have any question? If I understood correctly, because I could not hear very well, yes, the context windows today in the models is becoming very large. So probably we are not filling the context windows with all the HTML we can download from our single page. Of course, there is a bunch of nonsense code in the HTML, all the CSS stuff we can see in the code, all the scripts that are not useful for scraping, and this can cause some hallucinations. So what was a better way to approach this issue is basically pre-process the HTML by cutting off in a certain way the unuseful stuff you download from the website, and focusing the LLM to learn from the code inside the meaningful part of the website. I don't know if this answered it for you.
How do you implement testing?
Oh, that's a good question, because testing LLMs is flaky by default. You don't know what happens in the next run. What I found interesting is that the more precise and clean the instructions are in the rules inside the cursor, the more predictable becomes the behavior of the LLM. So it's all about creating a dumb guide for writing a scraper in trying to cover more cases as possible. But yeah.
Just in case they don't have time to test the new thinking model from OpenAI, the O4, where you can pass a picture, right? So basically, you would take a print screen, you would make a circle. Look, here is the price. And it would be able to learn how to better capture the right part of the page. Yeah. Did you have time to test it?
No, didn't test it, but could be a good approach. Again, when we have a broad range of websites and with few URLs, because I suppose that it will be even more time-consuming approach rather than using a normal, an older method to scrape data from HTML.
No, I mean during the process when we are helping to type the script, right?
Yes. That can be a good way. Thank you. Yes, I'm creating rules, and basically what I did, you can find it in the GitHub repository here. I've created a set of files. Each file is a sort of mini guideline on a certain topic. So we have the main file, and then we have the prerequisite file, which is basically says, okay, fetch the HTML, set a bunch of parameters, and then follow on with the guidelines, and then follow on with the next steps. And this creates a very detailed guide for the LLM to create the code.
How much
Okay, this depends from case to case. If you have to face a website with a heavy protection, of course, the HTML parsing is minimal. It's the minimal part of the scraping creation. But in case you are having a bunch of not protected websites, in this case, I find that it saves a lot of time because at least you are not starting from a white template with the generic selectors, but you're starting with a working mockup of the scraper. Maybe you're lucky and it works directly at the first time. In most cases, you have to fix something, but at least you are not starting from zero.
Maybe if I get the last, for the last question, do you prefer scraping like connecting to endpoints, to API endpoints, and front-end endpoints, or using the extraction?
Well, of course, if there is any API available, both internal or external API, it's preferred to use that because it's less prone to change. You don't have to find selectors. You just have to pass JSON files. But if it's not the case, of course, we go with HTML and selectors.
Hello, Pierluigi. Well, when we think about LLM scraping, we usually are thinking about the parsing or the actual scraping, but we do not see that much around LLM crawling. You know, so most of the companies that have LLM scraping APIs do not do the crawling, and that is the case also for open source projects. Most of them are focusing on the scraping part. So 2 questions. One, with these experiments that you've been running on your own, have you been doing the crawling part as well? Like this part has been also generated by the LLMs, the crawling part? And the second question would be, are you seeing some interesting developments on the crawling part with LLMs?
Okay. Is crawling a real issue? Because almost every website has a sitemap. So I don't know if it's enough in your use cases, but probably if you have to reconstruct the structure of a website, a sitemap when accessible, I think it's enough. Maybe you want to add the relationship between the pages, which is something different. And honestly, it's not my ground, so I cannot tell you if there can be some development around this stuff. Probably yes, because at the end of the day, it's another selectors to find. And but yes, you're right. It's a sort of branch that is underestimated and underrepresented in the APIs around here.
I think we have time for about one more question. Does anyone else have something? Yes? One moment.
So there are domains, e-commerce domains, where there are several different product layouts. So when you're doing the manual collection of these few URLs to do the code generation, I guess you try to include as many different layouts, but how do you think it could work, an automatic way of discovering all the layouts? And for example, you could get 3 examples and they don't have like the discounted price, but then the generated code would be missing these ones from the other ones. How would you solve this?
Oh, we should ask to ChatGPT. No, just kidding. Well, in this case, probably we need to set a new bunch of rules for this kind of cases where we say, okay, we have different set of pages. So inside the same scraper, please use one template or one other again, okay, depending from what you see in the HTML. Probably, I think it's the best way. It's what we do manually. If you think about it, it's what we do when we scrape manually.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pierluigi. Let's all give Pierluigi a round of applause. Thank you very much.